This is Jerome Corsi, and today is Thursday. It's August 24th, 2023. Thank you for joining us on thetruthcentral.com. We are doing podcasts every weekday. First story today is that Fox News had yesterday this presidential debate. And of course, I think, like everyone, I didn't watch it. I thought it was a waste of time. And I still think it's a waste of time. So I decided it was better to watch a baseball game. I started watching the Mets play the Braves last night. Got much more entertainment. This morning I caught up on it. But what I was really impressed with is a couple things. Number one is how worthless these candidates are. Not a single one of them, in my opinion, deserved to be on that stage. The one who dominated was Donald Trump, and he wasn't there. And that audience was angry. They ripped Chris Christie a new one, which he soundly deserved, in my opinion. I'll never forget him hugging Obama on Jersey Shore during Hurricane Sandy. The guy is a complete whore, as far as I'm concerned, in politics, and doesn't deserve to be on that stage. And Mike Pence is a huge disappointment. I wanted to support Mike Pence to begin with. I think if he had done a faith-based campaign and talked about redeeming the soul of America, he could have had a go at it. But Pence is just not. Washington's a tough place. I've been in Washington since I was a child. 1954 was the first time I remember being in Washington. I was just a kid. My dad was he was railroad union lobbyist and head of the public relations department. And he was a tough guy. He taught me a lot about politics. I was truant from school. I'd rather sit and watch the hearings on television. When the Kefauver hearings, crime hearings, they were much more entertaining than going to school. And sitting in the hearings, I learned a lot watching it and understood Washington. It's a tough place. You can't trust anybody in Washington. The whole place, I think the entire bureaucracy needs to be moved out of Washington. I'd put it in Death Valley and give them all the wind and solar they want. Let them figure out how to make it work. The rest of the country knows it's worthless technology. And I'm sick of being lied to. Sick of being lied to about COVID, that we're going to have another COVID lockdown. I think there's 3 or 4 cases worldwide of this variant, and they're hyping it already. I'm sick of this media thinking they can run narratives that are lies and getting people to believe them. Same about climate. We're going to have a climate lockdown. Well, the climate science is bogus, and we're going to cover that. So, Chris, you watched the debates last night. What did you think?
I did see the debates last night and watched them a little bit again this morning, kind of cut through some of the highlights. I thought it was actually a little more subdued than one might expect. It was less interesting because the front runner wasn't there. And the other part of the story is, the good thing is they didn't spend all the time kind of just jumping on the front runner. I also note this. There were a couple of candidates that made sure not to jump on the front runner or anything else, except for the one thing. They took down Pence because of the COVID spending. Is it a fair point to say that the Trump administration caused problems because they allowed the COVID spending? Or is it unfair? And I believe it's kind of unfair because it was something they didn't really know what to do with. They probably shouldn't have done, but wanted to rein in a little bit afterwards, where Congress at the time, which was majority blue, said, hey, we're not doing that. We're going to keep these entitlements. Well, that's something that I thought was a very interesting focus by the non-administration connected candidates.
Well, that's very inside Washington comprehension of what went on. And I quite frankly was bored with the whole discussion, because the point was that Donald Trump made mistakes in his first term. He allowed Fauci and these other jerks at NIH to come in and say millions of people are going to die unless you lock down the economy. He didn't have the sense to say, okay, you guys are lying to me, get out of here. I'm going to bring in my own group and find out if you guys are lying. And he could have easily cut through this and figured out that COVID was a bad flu and that we should have used hydroxychloroquine and zinc, as Dr. Zelenko said. There's nothing wrong with those, and they could be off-label prescribed, and that these vaccines were going to kill people. So the American people, I think, are sick and tired of being lied to, and it's going to get worse as the economy collapses, because the economy is now a Ponzi scheme. So I thought the whole vice presidential debate last night, except for people booing, the only part I liked was when the audience got rowdy and started booing all of them.
The audience was fine. They weren't as bad as one would think. They have the right to boo and cheer whoever they want. Brett Baer might have been a little upset about that, but the fact is, they're part of the whole thing. These are people who are upset at the way things are going on in Washington, and I believe that is the audience collectively. We're more in tune with what's going on with the country and the sentiment, obviously, than most of the politicians standing at the podium.
Well, I wouldn't give you 10 cents for Brett Baer. I was with Brett Baer in Canada during the George W. Bush administration when they had one of these trilateral meetings with, the North American Union, the Security and Prosperity Partnership in North America, George Bush's brilliant idea of globalism. And it was up in Canada, and Brett Baer was in the audience. He was the one who staged to ask Trump, "Are you guys trying to create a North American Union?" And Trump said, "Oh, no, we wouldn't do that." Okay, and I realized that Brett Baer was just another spokesperson set up to advance globalist lies. And the guy is about a tank. I mean, this is one of the biggest guys I've ever seen in my life if you see him in person. And I thought he was worthless. And Trump was lying. And I mean, I'm sorry, George W. Bush was lying when he said they weren't trying to create a North American Union. I watched this whole thing, and I said, this is a setup. Brett Baer is nothing but a mouthpiece for the globalists, and he is not Edward R. Murrow. This is a guy who can read a script, and he looks good behind the camera, so they're going to promote him instead of Brit Hume. Brit Hume at least understood journalism. This guy doesn't. Right. I've seen him walking around Washington, and I've seen him all kinds of different settings, and I wouldn't give you 10 cents for Brett Baer. Wouldn't give you 10 cents for Fox at this moment.
I prefer Les Nessman, if you will.
I don't. The whole Chris Wallace. I think Trump was right about Chris Wallace. He is a little prissy SOB.
He's trying to be his dad.
Well, he's not his dad.
I know he's not.
His dad came from the Edward R. Murrow School, which I remember as a kid. These guys went through World War II. They were tough.
No, they don't make those anymore. They make Dan Rather types now.
Even Dan Rather, was the beginning of the end of journalism.
Right.
But these guys are just actors, and they're just reading a script. And Fox News gives them the script, and if they don't follow the script, they're out.
Here's another actor thing for you. I want to point this one out. The reason why Trump might serve as the better president, or again, in many people's opinions, and especially the polls, is because they're all some of these people are trying to act like him. Ron DeSantis actually said, "We're going to get rid of Fauci. We're going to sit him down and say, Fauci, you're fired." So to make a point, after all this time saying Trump is not going to be a great presidential candidate, you steal a line from his game show. Okay.
Well, that's a good point. I mean, look, DeSantis is not ready for prime time.
No,
DeSantis I said this from the beginning. He should have given himself more time. That he was too anxious to become president, but he doesn't have what it takes. And the country is, I think, angry. They're not pleased about all these indictments from Donald Trump. They're not pleased with the Department of Justice that is so obviously corrupt. And they're not pleased with seeing Trump indicted 20 times or 100 times or 1,000 times in order to make him not be president, when Biden, as corrupt as he is and as completely incompetent mentally as he is, sitting on the beach not knowing where he is, eating ice creams and smelling little girls. This guy is a disgrace.
I still would have had a lot more respect for DeSantis because, remember, his debate strategy was leaked where he'd be attacking everybody. I'd have a lot more respect for him if he just stood there and did what he was going to do and said, "Yeah, I know you know my strategy. I'm going to do it anyway. Attack, attack, attack." He didn't. He was very subdued, which tells me, again, What's he going to do when he has to stand up to Congress?
Well, Trump basically it doesn't care. He's going to be who he is. Now, Trump's downfall is he trusted, he put in Reince Priebus as his chief of staff when he first came into Washington. Reince Priebus is a complete globalist toady. I never could stand Reince Priebus. I've seen him, been around him, in Washington. The guy is a complete establishment sellout.
I like the word toady.
Toady.
That's a great word.
And Trump made all these mistakes trusting these people. I know Washington, I can help you. Just trust me, I'll do it all. Okay, that's the first guy you throw out of your office. Okay, you don't need them to come in and tell you how to do their job. I'll tell you a story about Lincoln. Lincoln was elected president, and he was really from nowhere, from Illinois. He was a lawyer, and he'd been one term in Congress. He didn't like it. He went home. And all of his cabinet thought they should be president. Okay, so his Secretary of State, blocking his name right at the moment, but gave him a letter which basically said, Mr. President, if you just let me run the country, you can relax and I'll make sure it all works out. And Lincoln read the letter. And this gentleman came in and said, Mr. President, did you read my letter? He said, yes, I did. So what did you think of it? He said, not very much. So what do you mean? He said, I was elected to do this job and I'll do this job. I don't need you to do my job for me. If you want to do your job, you can keep it. If you don't want to do your job, I'll find somebody else who wants to do your job. I'm president. You're not. Now, that showed me that Lincoln understood Washington. And Lincoln understood that these guys weren't his friends. And he picked a cabinet. He didn't trust a single one of them. Samuel Chase, who wanted to be president, actually put his picture on the currency instead of a president. And Lincoln called him, what are you doing? You can't print currency with your picture on it. I mean, so Lincoln was constantly fighting his entire cabinet. And again, Trump has to go to Washington with a small group that are loyal to him. Jack Kennedy did that. He had a group that was loyal to him.
I figured Lincoln thought that whole thing with Salmon P. Chase putting his picture on the currency was a little fishy.
Well, it just shows that these guys aren't loyal to you. They're loyal to themselves. And that's Washington, D.C. So the debates, I watched Tucker interview Trump. I watched that for about 40 minutes this morning. And I thought that Trump, again, is in top form. And Trump will he's beat 2 attempts to impeach him. He did, I think, win the 2020 election. He's going to now have a chance to litigate that in court. The Democrats have made a massive mistake going after Trump. They've lost every time they've gone after Trump. I think Trump has the hand of God on him. And I think that there's yet enough people in the United States who understand God and understand what the United States of America is all about, that I am prayerful that God will not abandon us. The second story I want to cover is this Wagner group, this guy, Prigozhin, who there was a airplane leaving Moscow, and it was, I think, attacked by a missile. I think they took it down, and they killed the head of the Wagner group and his top. The Wagner group is an independent private army. And Wagner made the mistake of invading Russia with the private army. He wanted to challenge Putin. Well, challenging Putin is not a good idea. Everybody who's done it has ended up dead. And he's now added himself to the list. Putin is a gunslinger, KGB. He has no hesitation to kill his enemies. He has no hesitation to destroy Ukraine. If they want to resist him, Putin will destroy, he'll make Ukraine a wasteland. He's done it in every area he's occupied, and he's got deeply fortified positions. This Ukrainian counteroffensive, they're going to have to go through minefield after minefield after minefield in order to get to the Russians. In the meantime, the Russians have got them all targeted from space. The Russians can use any number of missiles. Russia has learned to coordinate its GPS systems from satellites, and it's invested massive amounts of money in rocketry and other weapons that are GPS guided. And Russia's got massive defenses. You can't get through them. So we send over these Abrams tanks. Russia laughs. Russia can detect these things from space and destroy them in 20 seconds. So the best estimates, I think, are that Ukraine has lost about 400,000 people and Russia's lost maybe 50,000 casualties. And Russia's destroyed much of everything it's touched in Ukraine. If you take a look at the true stories coming out, and sometimes you have to watch the news internationally to see it. When I get a chance, I watch the Italian television. They actually report from there. And the buildings are destroyed. The towns are wrecked. They have no electricity, no gas, no people. Ukraine will be devoid of people. They'll all have fled and, now flooded into Poland and other countries trying to survive. And Ukraine is devastated. And Putin will take the whole thing if he has to. The NATO is not going to win this war. And if we continue it, Putin will escalate to nuclear weapons. He's not going to lose. And all the news you're getting on it about we have to stop Putin, what we have to stop is thinking we have to fight Russia. These stupid Democrats have hated Russia. They loved Russia. In 1917, Russia was communist. The Democrats fell in love, gushing over about how wonderful Stalin was. Well, he killed millions of people. And here, all the liberal left in the New York Times did was report how wonderful the Soviet Union was under Stalin, lying. I write about that in my new book, which is coming out. I can't wait for it to be out. It'll be out in November. I got my first copies of it. And I think you're going to find this book is one you're going to want to read. It's not easy entirely, but it's the truth about neo-Marxism, cultural Maoism, and anarchy. And it follows what I did. They look alike because it's two parts of the trilogy. The third book will be on this transhumanism, and that'll be out next year. So the point is that communism kills. It's a lie. It's a destructive malware. And anybody who opposes Putin, who is not communist, doesn't believe in it, and is a gunslinger, he will win. And NATO, these people running NATO are fools. They're leftists. As I showed yesterday, we now have enough internal memos that are being released through Freedom of Information Act to know that the State Department and the second impeachment effort against Donald Trump, people like this Victoria Nuland, are neocons. They just want to go to war everywhere. Everywhere she goes, there's a war or Maidan rebellion. And I think she hates everybody except herself. The State Department has been out there with these color revolutions with George Soros, which were completely destructive and engineered. And that's something the American people need to understand as well. These were intentional wars, and they knew how to create them by having incidents where they had big protests and they'd start to kill people in the protests. Protests would get violent, and it would turn into a civil war out of which the Soros would achieve what he wanted, which would be to remove whoever was president from president and put his own puppet in place. That happened in country after country after country. And Soros is one of the most destructive human beings ever to have lived. And with money, and funded, I'm sure, by, our intelligence agencies are so compromised. You saw that with Clapper, who said basically, are we spying on Americans? And he said, not wittingly. This guy's a jerk. He knew we were spying on Americans. If you're spying on Americans, you're spying on the people who are the chief financial officers of major corporations. If you're doing that, you can read what their earnings are going to be before they're published every quarter. Well, that gives you a great advantage to trade accordingly and make billions of dollars with advanced knowledge. So anyone who is on the inside of the leaks from our intelligence agencies, don't think that this is a racket. You're crazy. So Soros is funded easily by Putin or anyone else who has compromised our intelligence agencies. And if you can buy the guy who's president of the United States for a few millions or billions, I guarantee you can buy your way into the NSA. And with corruption rampant and no one doing anything about it, our systems are compromised. Then we got to realize that this is the case. But opposing Putin is a bad idea. Okay, let's move on. The next story I want to cover is along the similar themes. I want to talk now to shift about just how bad we're shape our economy, and how about these Democrats. Our financial system is now a Ponzi scheme. We've printed too much money. We've got trillions of dollars, and trillions of dollars, that's not a joke. $33 trillion in debt. We were at a point where we had 10 trillion not very long ago. Well, it'll be 60 trillion pretty soon. And we're just printing money to pay off the interest, which is going to become $1 trillion pretty soon every year. So our cities are deteriorating. We're defunding the police. And now if you wear a Rolex watch in any major city, San Francisco, New York, Chicago, etc., you're likely to end the day without that watch. As soon as somebody sees it, they're going to target you and steal it. And what are you going to do about it? There's no police there to protect you. That's happening in our cities. This is what happens in third world countries, where you can't go out at night dressed elegantly or with any jewelry or anything of expense, because you're not going to end the night with it. And if our cities have deteriorated to this point, we're in bad shape. And the American people know it. Pretty soon you won't be safe in your own home. And corporate bankruptcies are on the rise. This, again, is being underreported. But as you look at the numbers, it's not just bank failures. The bank failures are preceded by bonds like mortgage-backed securities, commercial real estate-backed securities failing. And as a consequence, the banks are taking losses. And the U.S. corporations who are, in 2003, over 400 corporations have gone under. 400. Corporate bankruptcies are rising at the fastest pace since 2010, except for during the pandemic, and are double the level this time last year. Companies that are over $1 billion in liabilities, there's 16 companies that have filed for bankruptcy in that group. Most notable are the Beyond Bath & Beyond, Silicon Valley Bank. All these banks demonstrate that when you go woke, you go broke. We're seeing now a whole set of companies, including Budweiser, realizing that going woke was a bad idea. They just destroyed one of the major brands for beer that has ever existed. So it's being called Butt Light for good reasons. And I think you can figure that out for yourself. The point is, we are in a crisis economically, and it's going to collapse. And that's why I've written this book about the coming global crash and how it will create an historic gold rush. Now, if you want to get in on this on the early stages, it's time to get your money out of the stock market, including your retirement savings, at least some portion of it, put it into gold and silver. Want a copy of that book free, call up that 800 number on the website, and you'll be talking to Swiss America. They'll be happy to counsel you. You say, well, I don't have thousands of dollars to put into gold. If you have $1,000 or a few $100s worth of gold, the currency collapses, that gold is going to go up in value. And we're beginning to find out there was a big prosecution yesterday of two of the precious metal traders. I believe they were from JP Morgan Chase, who went to prison for manipulating precious metals markets to their favor. And that's been going on for a long time. You can also get this Walking Liberty $50 benefit if you talk to Swiss America. These coins are worth, it's a lost leader for Swiss America. First time people working with Swiss America can buy 250 of these coins at virtually what they cost, the value of the silver in them. They're over 90% real silver. Today's coins are worthless. They're pieces of metal crap. These coins were worth something. When the United States of America had a solid currency, we printed currency that was valuable. It was beautifully engraved. It really had precious metal in it. It had value. These coins today don't even last 20 minutes. They're so poorly created. Chris, you want to comment?
I remember the days when we had coins that were actually silver when they said they were silver coins. That was a long time ago. I still have a few of the old ones. I think so, right? Yeah.
Yeah,
But
well,
they're not worth the old phrase is they're not worth the paper it's printed on. Well, it's not worth the tin it's minted on. How about that?
yeah, they're just metal crap, these coins today. And
Right.
they don't last. They're worthless. They feel cheap in your hand. And of course, the government wants us to go pay. I think people are disruptive element, and the fact that he has been indicted so many times is actually going to work to his advantage. I think he's going to beat these charges, probably get convicted, and it will take appeals to win. But the American people, I think, are sick of this. I think Donald Trump could be elected from prison, and he could be president from prison if that's what they want. But it will be to their disgrace, not to Donald Trump's disgrace.
He could pardon himself and get out of prison. Am I correct here?
Well, probably, of course, they would. Again, we're in such a point where the Constitution, this left with this lawfare, have put so many holes in the Constitution, it's begun to look like Swiss cheese. And the point is that, we need to restore the Constitution to its original meaning and get government back into the fundamental rules our founding fathers had. But since, the secular government doesn't believe in God, it's going to be very tough to reinstitute these rules, which are based on natural law and natural right. And that concept for the modern neo-Marxist or cultural Maoist means nothing. They think reality is subjective. They can make it what they want to be. Imagine there was no God. Imagine there was no borders. John Lennon, I like to say, imagine there was no John Lennon. That'd be probably more valuable than any of the other things he said ever.
Well,
At any
Paul would
rate,
get more songs, I guess. So.
well, the Beatles were a fad, and they were interesting. When you really analyze a lot of what they were about, they were, subtly revolutionary, not so subtly once you understood what they were really saying. And John Lennon was the worst of the bunch. They didn't believe in God.
I'm a Ringo guy anyway, so
well, that's all right. That's fine. I suspected you would be a Ringo guy. But why not?
Of course.
Of course. Okay, let's do a couple more stories here before we run out of time. And I try to keep the podcast into bounds so that we don't continue endlessly. Let me get caught up here myself for a second. And the next story I want to cover is an article I've written. It's on AmericanThinkerRightNow.com. And two of the, I think, best climate scientists, and quite frankly, both of these scientists gave very positive comments to my book on Truth About Energy, Global Warming, and Climate Change, which I'm insisting you've got to read if you want to understand the climate. And the two guys are Will Happer, who is a professor emeritus of physics at Princeton, and Richard Lindzen, professor emeritus of Earth, Atmospheric, and Planetary Sciences at Harvard, I believe it was. They basically made a case that these new EPA rules which are going to demand that we go to such and such a percentage of electric vehicles by 2030. We quit using stoves. We start eating bugs. All these things they want are based on faulty science. And they've gone to set up a court challenge to the EPA because there are Supreme Court decisions which say these agencies have to be making rules based on scientific knowledge, and they define science as being able to be challenged, and that these agencies have to take into consideration challenged scientific views that may not be what the EPA ideologically wants to consider. That's a very powerful legal argument. Now, if we have a Supreme Court that is not corrupt and won't listen to, any reason, they won't win, but they're right. That's what the constitutional principles do say. Now, Happer and Lindzen are pointing out that carbon dioxide is essential to life, that without carbon dioxide, we wouldn't be here, both because it's a greenhouse gas, but not very much of a greenhouse gas. It's less than 1% of all greenhouse gases. Water vapor is 70%. And this volcano, which just erupted in Tonga, which nobody knows about, it's a huge volcanic undersea eruption. It threw a tower plume of water vapor and gases into the stratosphere. It was seen from space, and probably it contributed to global warming because it threw a lot more water vapor, which is a greenhouse gas, into the environment, much more powerful than carbon dioxide being emitted by burning hydrocarbon fuels. But the point is that without carbon dioxide, which plants absorb, we're going to have fewer plants. We should be increasing the carbon dioxide. And if we have fewer plants, the number of people worldwide who are going to starve is increased. And they know this. The climate agenda is a depopulation agenda. I prove that in the first part of my book. These are Malthusians. They have created this existential crisis on false science. Carbon dioxide is not the control knob for the Earth's temperature, and anyone who is legitimately trained in climate science knows that. Forces like the currents in the oceans, this El Nino, are much more powerful, causing warming. The sun cycle 25 being a hotter sun cycle than cycle 24, which it is today. All these contribute to warming. And by the way, I don't know for sure whether this really is the hottest summer on record. Certainly in New Jersey, it's August and it's getting pretty cool already. And, again, you can't base a climate trend on a few days. Climate trends take hundreds of thousands of years to be seen accurately. The journalists don't know a thing about statistics, and they just publish what the IPCC and the United Nations tell them to publish. And again, if they don't publish that, they lose their jobs. Similar in the universities. If you aren't woke, you're out of there. And one of the reasons I left universities was I saw this developing. And by the way, the last story today, China's economy is collapsing. And it's going to collapse pretty fast. What the problem is that China has a couple of difficulties. Number one, it's had a real estate bubble, and some of these major real estate companies are now going bankrupt. And that's losses that have to be taken even in a communist system. Secondly, they don't provide for people in their senior years. China thinks old people are worthless. They ought to just die. China could kill them all. They would have euthanasia once you're about 50 years old or 60 years old. Once you are on the side where you're going to have to be taken care of, not productive, they don't want you. They throw you away. So Chinese people know this, so they are not spending money. They don't spend money, you've got a consumer collapse, and China is realizing it's dependent upon its people in order to have a country. The Chinese communists think the people are worthless. Well, the people are worthless until they don't spend any money. People are worthless until they oppose the government. People are worthless until they're sick and tired of being lied to about these diseases and the vaccines, sick and tired about being lied to about the climate, sick and tired about being lied to about everything. Once you lose the people, you lose the government. And we have distrust of our agencies because our agencies don't deserve respect. This Washington Beltway crowd running Washington and running the nation with their neo-Marxist cultural Maoist ideas about racism are absolutely worthless when you can't feed your family. You're really going to care about what gender you are when you're losing your home? I mean, these people are absolutely godless. They don't have value. They don't understand the necessity that we've got hundreds of years of political philosophy where people were saying human beings have God-given rights. And these are not bestowed on human beings by the state. The state that doesn't respect the human values that God imbued into human beings is going to fail. We have a failed government right now. We have a failed economy right now, and it's going to collapse. This is why I have written this book on the coming global crash. I think it will be fulfilled. Take a look also at all of our sponsors. My Vital C, which is, we now have a new book out on that, which is just out. I'm writing books like crazy these days. This is the book on My Vital C, Living Longer, Better. It just came out. I wrote it with Chris Burries, who is the head of My Vital C. He was in Houston, and he worked with he's co-founder of SES Research and My Vital C. He worked with the group of scientists at Rice University in the 1980s who discovered carbon-60. They were actually looking for interstellar space. Carbon-60 is more common in interstellar space than it is on Earth, but it is also on Earth and has remarkable properties for longevity. It's a remarkable molecule of 60 or more carbon atoms in a cage structure around the nucleus. And I've taken it for 4 years, and they have hair creams and body creams, and my hair has gotten color back into it. I'm not doing anything to color it. I'm 77 years old at the end of this month, and I've never been more productive. If you want to give it a try, I'd recommend it. Look at all the places where we're podcasting. They're uplisted on the website. Chris, any final words before we wrap up?
You can find all of our broadcast and podcast outlets right here on the top, as you said before. On the upper right-hand corner in the body here, you'll find us on Rumble, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Spreaker, Deezer, and plenty more wherever you get your podcasts. Check it out. You can even find us on Amazon Alexa. How about that? Just say, Alexa, play the Truth Central with Jerome Corsi.
Hey, better watch out. It'll start doing it on my computer while we're talking.
That's probably true.
Yeah, well, the Siri or whatever it is has a tendency to pop up as soon as I say certain words. So my computer is listening to everything I say.
Feel free to comment on these videos and the stories. We'd love to hear from you. And drop us a review on some of these podcasts, because we'd like to know what you think.
Yeah, well, I hope that we're entertaining the NSA every day as they listen in to what we're doing.
Yes. As long as we're not putting them to sleep, we're in good shape.
Well, I doubt if we're putting them to sleep. It seems the intelligence agencies have followed me for a long time, and after they tried to put me in prison with Mueller and I refused to take their plea deal and they didn't indict me, I suspect we've developed a new level of respect over there. I try to live my life in accordance with God's rules. In the end, God always wins. God will win here too. Join me getting down on my knees. I want to have everyone join me. I'm doing this in the spirit of us collectively asking God to forgive us for taking God out of the schools and out of the public square. That was a disgrace, allowing so many babies to be murdered in the womb. We have violated God's law. We've allowed this godless secularism to dominate our culture. It will collapse and fail. And I pray that God will hear our prayer and heal our land. Healing our land is going to be painful. I hope that God can do this without it being too painful. If more of us, in the spirit of 2 Chronicles 7:14, repent, God will spare the land. So Dr. Jerome Corsi, today is Thursday. It's August 24th, 2023. Thank you for joining us on The Truth Central. This is about truth. TheTruthCentral.com. We're doing podcasts every weekday. Thank you for joining us. God bless.